Well,
So, does anything come to mind to you about power and corruption?
I mean, I'd like to discuss what corruption is in that sense, because I think that would be a fun little thing.
That's
And
pretty
what
cool. I
really
have
is.
not done research on corruption, so we'll be very spitballing.
Yeah, because I mean, I think it's easy to say that corruption is like a misuse of power, but
Oh no, never mind. I've done research about power. I know what corruption is in terms of power. I can't tell you the entire thing.
there you go, right? Well, I mean, from somebody who hasn't done any research on this.
AP, give us your views.
Oh, goodness sakes.
No.
Okay.
My
His
views are I
views on
am
corruption
interested
are
in Heck's
no.
views. Go on, Heck.
Yeah, heck, come on.
Well, I mean, corruption, usually what people think, or at least what comes to mind, is that it's the misuse of power, right? But then it starts getting iffy already because the misuse of power seems to be really subjective. You know, what is a misuse of power? I mean, you could look at, what's a fun political leader right now? You can look at Trump right now, right?
Yes, that's fun.
I'm sure there are plenty of people out there right now who'd say that he's corrupt or misusing his power or something like that. But what has he done in that sense? You know, like what is so morally like bad? Like, sure, he makes some offensive tweets and like the way he speaks and the way he, it reacts to interviews. Now that's all iffy, but I mean, is it corruption? They tried to get him impeached, you know?
I think one of the corruption issues is that he uses his position for financial gain.
Does he?
There's been a big discussion about it.
There was some discussion, I don't remember. And I also remember part of the corruption was that he influenced the voting system somehow by like talking to Ukraine or something. I don't remember.
But then
he used power in some way, shape, or form to immorally gain more power.
And is that corruption though? I mean, it seems
immorally.
It seems abhorrent from our point of view, right? But I mean, from his point of view, or from a neutral one, he just exploited, a clear mistake in the system to gain more power.
It's not a mistake in the system if you intentionally break the rules.
Oh, well, I mean, would you say that he is intentionally breaking the rules like that?
I'm no expert. I have heard he has done it.
Is corruption using power to break the rules?
Well, I mean,
not necessarily power, but I think yes, that is one of the big points of corruption. I don't think we can clearly define corruption in its entirety. When talking about figures of power, figures of great authority, so we're talking politics here, there's been a lot of research about corruption, obviously.
Yes.
MP?
I know, I was like, yeah, I was going to make a joke, but it's not very funny. It's funny in my head, but I know it probably wouldn't be that funny coming out, so
no,
go ahead.
It'll be great.
MP wants to come out, but he doesn't think it's funny. Okay, power. Power and responsibility is a big one I want to get into in a bit. And for now, I would love to say that there is two kinds of power, two kinds of political power. All political power can apparently be categorized in these two things. And maybe they're in an overlap. All right.
And they
are? I'm just trying to look for the specific wording. There we go. There is two kinds of power, and that is socialized versus personalized power. Socialized power being the concept of using your power for the benefit of the whole of people whom you have power over. So trying your best to build a better future. And personalized power being using the very same power for your own gain while ignoring or even diminishing the standing of the larger social group. And I think that's one of the key points of corruption. Once you are no longer thinking about implementing the best thing for the largest amount of people, that's a clear sign of corruption.
Man, the government is corrupt.
It is.
I mean, it's
everything is corrupt to a certain degree. We just try to keep it to a minimum.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be that way, right? I mean, how can one human ever act without their best interest at hand? I'm sure there can be self-sacrificial moves or idealists or things like that, or behaviors. But at the very end of the day, it's impossible to be completely
You don't need to be ignorant of your own social standing. You just don't need not to put it above the the well-being of others, and you can do that. You can have your own interests at mind without thinking you're the top of the world. And that's leading us to how you can avoid being corrupt, because we've all heard power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yes.
And I have several opinions on that. I would like to say, first of all, is the most important points we can talk about here is how to avoid it.
Don't get absolute power.
Yeah, no one will get absolute power, but everyone will get some amount of power. So how do we avoid becoming corrupted? How do we avoid corruption at a large scale? And that's really where I want to key in, because I don't think we can necessarily influence how corrupted other people are going to be all that much. You can't decide whether somebody else is going to be this or that corrupt, what kind of opinions they're going to have, etc. So the only person you can really try to avoid being corrupted is yourself. And I'd like to say you should absolutely focus on yourself and focus on being the best kind of person you can be, and avoiding any signs of corruption if you ever get to have or wield any amount of power.
I mean, I think corruption in that sense, the usage of it, abuse of power for personal gain. I mean, that comes from that just comes from insecurity, right? At the end of the day.
Not necessarily.
Don't you think so?
I think it comes from insecurity. Yeah? I just think it always and only comes from insecurity.
Oh, you think it? So you're taking it one step further.
Yes.
Well, see, I mean, it's like those cases of, let's say, I'm gonna put it like quote unquote famous people or rich people, and the cases you get of them being really unhappy. I think you see it a lot in YouTube nowadays, because YouTube really bases its system off this like going viral thing. It happens a lot, and people get famous very quickly, very suddenly, and they kind of get ripped out of their normal lives. And then, wow, now I have money, now I have influence, now I have all this power. And then, they ride high on this wave for like weeks or months. But then eventually it always gets to that point where you get those videos, where they're like, oh, I'm so depressed, sad, etc., whatever issue they have. And I think that's because, when we aren't doing well, we kind of look forward to like a different kind of life, If we're poor and we're unhappy, we kind of look like, oh, if only I had the money, then I'd be happy all the time. That kind of attitude.
I think what you're talking about here is in one sentence.
Yeah.
Sorry for undercutting you, but time. And so it's you seek external validation in order to fulfill the gap that a lack of internal validation has given you. Yes. Unfortunately, it obviously doesn't work because it's two different kinds of validation. Yep. Power is the very same thing, but I think it's more so applied to control, because if you don't control your power will end up controlling you, and your power will end up abusing you. And then in turn, you abuse your power. It's a cycle. You need to control yourself, then you can control your power. And I also think with power, one of the hardest things and one of the best things to do is not to use it.
Well, how do you mean that?
Well, for any kind of influence or power you have, I'm a great fan of letting people develop their own personalized philosophical thoughts and views, because I don't think there can be one general truth. So what I'm saying is that we try to limit our influence, limit the amount of power we exert over other people. And even if we could do more, we should always be asking ourselves, is it really for the best if I do this? Or isn't it better if they figure it out by themselves, come to their own conclusions? And then we can, of course, help them with that. But we always got to keep in mind, they are different people from us. And so our rules, our thoughts, our way of thinking don't necessarily apply to them. That's why I think the best use of power really is not to use it. The top thing you can do.
I can see that. What do you think, EP?
A slight example, like at work, we're doing stuff. I have to use my quote unquote power as foreman or whatever, and tell them to do this thing, to like go over there and pick those weeds. And like,
I have to tell them weeds. I know the feeling.
And isn't that using power? Because like they've gone past those weeds 5 different times that day.
And they have using power.
Not seen I
It is using power. You're right.
But it's not letting the power control you, right? I mean, you're not being corrupted by your ability.
I know, but he does make a good counterpoint to me saying don't use power. So I'll have to review my my wording, and I should probably say control your power and use as little as you can.
So,
I mean, I think this ties back into good leadership, right? At that right?
Yeah.
Because at this point, you're not using. I think that ties back to what Summer said earlier, right? You're not using your power for yourself. You're just telling them to do better and then showing them how, right? I mean, it would be abusing it, I guess, if you called them like idiots and then really put them down.
Idiot, go pick those weeds I was supposed to pick.
There wouldn't be abusing power. There would be abusing your employees.
Yeah, but then doesn't he? Can you not only?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, there we go. God, you suck, Daryl. Can't believe this. 2 more of these and you're fired. I don't know.
I actually know a guy named Daryl who works at
not for much longer if he keeps up the attitude.
It's me, MP.
So, power. That was specifically in a work situation, employer versus employee. Except I'm not even employer. Whatever.
Yeah, you're just the employer's son.
Power should be used in a societal context.
Mm-hmm.
Societal. What was the term again?
Leadership.
No, societal.
Control.
Society versus personal.
Social and personalized. Socialized, personalized power.
Socialized power. So I guess that would be an example of socialized power, because in the end, it's like better for the company.
Yeah,
you know,
it is socialized power, and socialized power is probably most of the time, if not always, a good kind of power use. Question is then how we're all human, so we are all to some degree not necessarily corrupt, but flawed, faulty, and that's a good thing. Most of the times, and this time it's I'd say a strong indication on why we should try to limit our use of power, because we always will end up screwing up to some degree. So we can't really objectively say, okay, this is the best use of the power. This is the best result.
I beg to differ there.
Well, I disagree by drowning you.
Good, right, you drowned. I'm the only one left. I'm right.
No, by drowning
Roll
you.
my might. I win in the end.
Oh my god.
Survival of the fittest.
Of the fittest, yes. Because you clearly didn't survive because of social constructs like hospitals as a child.
Social constructs like hospitals somewhere. What?
Just the social the buildings.
social
contracts. There we go.
A hospital is just just a
it's just in your mind. Wake up, sheeple. Hospitals are out of the government.
You go to the hospital and they make you say all right, Jesus.
No, I would like to leave you to discuss what is a good leader, because we've talked a good deal about not abusing your power, and that's the main point. Don't abuse your power, since it's so easy. Probably don't use your power unless you have no other choice.
Mm-hmm. And
so I would like to say that's about the abuse and corruption of power. Now I want to get on the good side as well, because why shouldn't we cover the good parts? So I'll leave you to discuss that for a bit, since I'm going to be busy for like 5 minutes, then be right back. Wow. And I would love to hear your results. Go ahead. What makes for a good leader? What kind of practical tips do you have for people in order to be a good leader?
Be like Summer.
Just leave in the middle of the podcast. Can't believe this. No, I don't know.
It's not about believing, it's about knowing.
Jesus Christ, Summer. What do you think a good leader is, MP?
A good leader, defined in 2 attributes, is I don't know. Nice and knows what they're doing.
Well, I mean, yes, I can see that, right?
Yeah.
The fact that you need to have a certain level of empathy for the people you are leading, right?
Yep.
But I don't know. I mean, should a leader be defined by the tough decisions they have to make? And what do you think about that?
A large part of leadership is in the decisions. Yes.
Because oftentimes, it's inevitable that you as a leader would have to make decisions that are not liked by everybody, and even worse than that, disliked by a lot, or seemingly, like disagreeable to a lot of people, even if you do know that it's for the
bad trait.
Huh?
Boy, go away.
It's like the opinion is not a bad trait.
Go away.
What are you doing?
You said you were leaving us to discuss.
Yeah, I was. I was just coming back.
Oh, you said a few minutes. It's been like 10 seconds.
Good.
No, for goodness sakes.
Darn it. Okay, fine. We'll stop talking now. Jeez, Mom.
But yeah, well, I mean, I guess, Summer, what do you think of what I said?
I absolutely have no idea what you said.
Oh, for crying out loud.
I wasn't here.
Yeah, sure you were.
Good leadership qualities. Empathy.
Oh, yes. I absolutely wanted to bring it up as well.
Oh. Empathy. What was the other one?
Making hard
knowledge.
Oh.
Empathy, knowledge, and optimal decision making. What would you call that?
I mean, what is is a good leader somebody who can make seemingly the wrong decisions, right?
And you will make wrong decisions as a leader, and you'll have to be okay with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yeah. So I want to, first of all, chip in with empathy, because you've talked about having empathy for your employees. And to connect this to the second point of being smart, I also want you to would like any good leader to have empathy with themselves. Because if you beat yourself up for your mistakes, you'll end up ruining yourselves.
Yes.
So that's a very big point. That's also how people learn. Then, of course, I believe a leader ought to be very informed about whatever he is leading. Because we've talked about the three key points, in my opinion. Seeing the big picture, motivating people, and also managing people. And so I want to go deeper on each of these for a bit. Or is there might have been something I left out as well, and that's what we'll cover afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one is going to be seeing the big picture. That's, first of all, being informed, knowing all the things you got to do. Another very big thing is also you need to be able to pretend that you have a strategy, pretend you have a long-term plan, even if you have no idea what your long-term plan is. Mm-hmm. You got to keep people working together, keep large groups working together. And the way to do that is to have a goal. And even if you don't have a goal, pretend you have one. Make people believe you. Mm-hmm. And then go find a goal as fast as you can.
You know what sucks? You're doing that. When you're doing that, and then the people are like, oh, I don't want to do this. And you're just like, I don't have time to explain. So trust me, just do it. And they're just like, grumble, grumble, grumble. And then in the end, it works out. And they're like, well, I did a good job. And I'm like, yeah, you're welcome. And they're like, what? You didn't do anything. I'm like, bro, you're welcome.
I can kind of see what you mean. I think at that point.
Yeah, I think Impy has 2 of the 3 traits of being a great leader, and is sorely missing one of them.
I mean, I don't know what the 3 traits are, but from...
I just told them.
Oh, well, they blanked my mind already. My point is that the way it seems is that there's no connection between your leadership and the results that have come by, right? So maybe the issue was there wasn't enough gravitas, Like there wasn't...
there wasn't enough gravity? Are we running out of gravity again?
For goodness sake, Summer. There wasn't enough charisma in that sense, right? Like you really have to...
Right, my subjects.
Yeah, I mean, it seems silly, but I mean, doesn't that work? It seems like they kind of had an issue, but then they didn't come to you for leadership, but then you gave it to them anyways, and then when the situation resolved, they're like, haha, I'm so great, In both cases, in failure or in success, they wouldn't realize that, it's attributed to you. And, if they attribute failure to you, then I don't know, maybe it's just not good employees.
It's the worst when they're like, oh, you failed. And I'm like, what? I didn't fail. That this stuff happened without any of my input at all. And they're like, well, you failed. I'm like, I mean, technically, I guess I failed because I'm the foreman, so any failure is my fault. But me personally, no, I did not
you
fail.
guys. And then you punched him.
That would be good leadership.
No, punching people isn't good leadership.
Well, I mean,
And
some
also addressing them as subject isn't. But seeing the big picture is, we've discussed that. You got to have a plan for the future, know what's coming up, and be able to formulate a plan on how to deal with it. Second part is motivating people, and that's what Imperfect has not been doing in his story, because he's told people what to do. He's had a plan, he's managed them, he's found the right people, the right jobs, and then he did unfortunately not motivate people, and that's one of the hardest ways, because you need charisma, and charisma is usually believed to be something that people have from birth. Some do, most of us don't. What you need for charisma is really to study up on it and to think of all those things.
Or you need to be
Go ahead.
Or you need to be like me, naturally beautiful and charismatic.
Yes, I am sure you are.
I know.
Your own way.
Shush.
I have met you, and you're a very smart guy to most people you've been talking to.
Oh, am I?
Those which I have talked about you with agree, or have told me this, yes.
He's been talking to people about you.
Yeah, somewhere. Who out of my life have you been contacting?
What you gonna do?
Well, I mean, I think, I don't know, on a bit of a tangent here, right? I don't like displaying myself as intelligent or capable. I'm
I know,
sure
right?
you can link some sort of mental thing to it, but I mean, I always thought, isn't there an advantage to being seen as lesser than you are? That way you get easier tasks, and that way you get, less responsibility, but you can master them much more easily. And if something does come up that requires more expertise, you already set the bar lower, so there's no way you can't handle it. You know what I mean? Is that too sneaky?
I see some strong striking problems, and I would love to discuss them with you afterwards. So if you could just note it down, because I personally have a hard different approach on leadership and on guiding people.
Sure.
Which is the one I'd love to bring up for discussion right here. And afterwards, note this down, and we'll talk about it later, because it is also a very good point. I might learn something from it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Going back to motivation. Charisma is something you learn a lot of times, and there is a few key pointers I want to give you. So the first of all is, again, do your research, psychology, read up on it, look for people who you personally think are charismatic. The second one is great social connections, be involved with your employees, know their personal life. And again, empathy goes in there, because you shouldn't only theoretically understand their lives, but also get them, bruh.
Yeah,
do you guys understand what I mean? You should be able to be to presume how their life is going, how they're going to react to stuff, and be okay with that. To accept their beliefs, to accept their ways of thought, even if you personally disagree.
Some weird guy once told me that people don't care about what you have to say unless they know that you care about them.
Yeah, it goes something. Some weird guy once told me, people don't care what you know unless they know how much you care. So it's a very interesting approach. It's almost as if we've heard the same stuff. And yeah.
That weird guy had a weird habit of correcting me.
He did. Which is odd, because you are still always correct. I think the weird guy just likes spelling things out differently and repeating the most important ones.
I think that weird guy needs to mind his own business.
I think he does. Pretty well, even.
Get a room, you two. Jeez.
We are. Why are you in here, MP? Stop disturbing our time in twain. Unless you want to join in. I mean, you did mention one thing to come out.
This guy is moving on.
Okay, moving on. Motivation. Charisma, caring about people, understanding people. Next thing is also figuring out what is their goal in this company. What are they working for? And doing that. One more big thing is to also invite criticism. As any type of good leader, you will want to get as much valid criticism as you can. You want to encourage everybody to just come forward with their problems. Because that's one of the most common failings in big business management. When you become a manager, people are so scared of your position, they don't get to tell you what they think, what they feel are problems. They just feel differently about you. And that way you lose connection to the ground floor. And you really need that as a good leader, as an exemplary leader, because that's where the problems start up. And that's where you want to beat them, because that's the earliest stage, the easiest one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so keeping a connection to people, inviting criticism. And finally, you've talked about people or employees blaming you for not blaming you, not what's it called? Crediting you for success nor failure. And they will probably always think more about themselves, which is something you've got to be okay with. Leadership is far less about power than you guys think. It's much more about responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
It's really just trying to get people to work together and relying on them a lot as well. And just taking the blunt for the things that go wrong. And when things go wrong, when times are hard, that's when it's really the best time for the leader to show up and to show that they care. I've seen a great video on this. I'll send it to you so you can link it in the description of this podcast. And it's about leadership, about how to be a good leader. It's about, I think, 48 minutes long. And goes into great detail about those points. There's also a short text attached which sums them up, and it's about a 2-minute read. So there's that if you don't have much time. What the guy talking in this video mentions is that he used to be a manager, a very high manager for the bank, for the top bank in Australia. And then eventually, unfortunately, one of their employees got involved in an accident and didn't make it out alive. And so I'm just going to retell the story he tells here. Obviously not as good as he does because I wasn't there. And yeah, I just thought it was a really good example of how you should be there to support people in hard times. So he didn't really know that employee. And then he pondered about what to do afterwards. The funeral was organized and the head of HR came to him, of human resources. And then the head of HR said, "You're going to go to the funeral, aren't you?" And he said, "No, I didn't think I was because I don't know the guy. It would be kind of rude to go there, in my opinion." And HR just starts talking to him for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, keeps explaining things, keeps bringing up points and trying to convince him. And the more he listens, because he is paying attention and he is going in this unbiased, he sees how there is a really valid point to going there, because it shows that the company really cared about this employee. It shows this to the family, and it also shows to your employees, to the other ones, and to everybody else present, that you care about the people working under you. And that's going to make them feel much more comfortable about opening up to you, telling you those problems, and also about working at this company. Because if you like the place, and if you are liked at the place, you're way more likely to stay. And really, I think one of the key points in any job is how good do you feel working there? How fun is it? And not as much how much money do you make. So I would gladly take a worse paying job if I was able to afford life. I'd take the worst paying job out of them all if it had the best social construct and it had the best people. Because I'm going to spend 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week there. It's much more important how I spend those hours than how much money I earn. And so eventually he does go to the funeral, our manager, and the family is just so incredibly grateful. And the widow starts going up to him and personally thanking him for showing up, for showing how much they care. And the family tells him how much it meant to them that he personally came there. And years later, he reads a book which says weddings optional, funerals mandatory. And there is an interchapter in this book titled this way. It explains how when things are going good, people are generally happy and fulfilled and they're feeling great about themselves. But when things are good, there's not as much need to show yourself because you also want to be humble. Humility is a great thing, which you have in abundance already, unfortunately. Right? You've talked about wanting to portray yourself as worse than you are. And that's this thing cranked up a bit too much because humility is great, just not as much as you're doing.
It reminds me of that Jesus quote or that story, you know, where it's like, oh, some guy is dying, and like scenes before he's walking down the beach with Jesus, and like scenes before of his life are flashing by, you know, and you know, he keeps walking until he's seen all his memories, and he looks back and he turns to Jesus and he's like, Jesus, you know, why you said you'd be with me there like all the time, so why when the times were tough, you know, there was only one set of footprints? What the fuck, man? And then I think Jesus, you know this, Impy?
Well, he certainly did not curse.
Jesus, God. Yeah, you want to continue?
No, you got it. Continue on,
Right.
Mac.
So Jesus turns to him and he's like, those are the times when I carried you, right? And that's like the whole cheesy thing of like, I guess the same thing you're describing, leadership. So only kind of there in the hard times. But also, now that I mentioned this story, there's a very similar story where, the guy is not walking down the beach with Jesus, but he's walking down the beach with Sasquatch. And then by the end of it, he turns to the Sasquatch and he's like, Sasquatch, you said when I devoted myself to you, you'd be with me there all the time. Why, when the times were tough, are there only one set of footprints, And then the Sasquatch turns to him and says,
Okay. I agree. Okay, I think we've talked about leadership, though. I'll send you guys the link later. Is there anything you would love to cover more, or can we go on to the juicy part?
Let's move
Bless
on.
you.
Excuse me. Thank you. No, I think I'm good with leadership.
Yeah, you're pretty good. I would recommend you look into charisma, because I know you've got the people management skills. I know you've got the thinking ahead skills, obviously, and I also know you don't have as much charisma as you could, because
but it's so hard.
And that's why it's so fun. Hard things are like training. You're toughening up your mind.
This weird path. Like 5 years from now, Impy's going to be the supreme leader of the world. And because you taught him charisma.
I could imagine many things that are worse.
So I mean, like, slight story, but last Friday, it's about work and stuff. Last Friday,
I gave you my heart, and the very next day.
Last Friday, everyone at work came together and said, Impy, or no, sorry, they said, Tyler, why are you so charismatic? Why are you so great? We all love you. This work wouldn't work without you. You're the best. We love you, Tyler.
I mean,
and then something unusual happened.
No, so for the first half of the day, we couldn't work. For till 11 o'clock, we couldn't go out and do our work because it was raining.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, I'll just tell them to not come in for the half day, and I need to go buy a bunch of other materials for other jobs, and I'll do that, and we'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, push back the jobs till next week or so. And I was like, I mean, I don't want to do it. I would rather be working and making money, but whatever. It's raining. I don't know when the rain's going to stop, so I'll just go.
Mm-hmm.
And then I made up my mind, and I felt nothing else towards that decision except good job. Not even good job, just I made a decision. Good. And then my dad, who owns a company, I mean, he owns a company. He's not doing much work anymore, but he's just like, no, you shouldn't have done that. You should have gone out working. Oh, I lost money. Oh, blah, blah. Oh, blah, 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 blah. For days, he was just like, oh, I can't believe you. That was not the right decision.
I get the feeling your dad really loves it when people come to work regardless of stuff, because we've had something very similar with you asking your workers to stay home a few weeks ago.
Yeah, it was that. But then he was like, "Oh, God, they should have come in," and he was like, whatever. I just want you to show remorse for what you did. I'm like, I have no remorse in me. I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going on this whole spiel about, when customers they want their jobs done and they're going to complain to you and you're going to have to be all sad to them. And I'm like, I don't understand it. I don't care. I don't,
mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter. my decision and blah 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 blah. So I guess if that's part of charisma, I don't have it. I mean, that was.
You don't. No one has charisma. You do it. And for those customers, I'm gonna ask you to do something. Think of a single customer which is gonna complain to you, or maybe has, and about their day, because
rod, just kick the shit out.
No,
how dare
heck, please don't.
And off him,
please. Thank you. What I wanted to say is that you are certainly capable of thinking. They were planning ahead for this house to be finished, so they're understandably frustrated. And then what you should be showing remorse for isn't about your decision, because it was the correct one, but much rather the circumstances, because they want you to relate to them. That's what really calms people down most of the time. And you can relate to them, can't you? Because you can see their point.
Yeah, I mean, So, in another situation, we were at this lady's house doing work for her, and I told one of my guys to go cut this tree, cut some branches off of this tree, elevate it a little bit.
Yeah.
And then I had to leave to go get some stuff. Well, I come back, and the guy comes over to me. He's like, "Yo," or no, he didn't say "yo." He was like, "Yo." So the lady came out.
He didn't say "yo." He was like, "Yo."
So the lady came out and she was yelling at us for cutting that tree, and I was like, "Yeah, I knew she was gonna do that." And then she came out and she was crying because we cut this tree, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry that we cut the tree without asking you. I'm sorry that you feel this way." But
did it work? I don't think that works, to be perfectly honest. Like, I don't. If I was upset about something and I heard "I'm sorry you feel that way," I would be more upset considerably.
I agree with you. It was like, "Hey, I'm sorry we didn't ask you for doing that before. We won't do it again."
No, we will do it again.
Floating around recently, what was it? It's like this dad texting this guy. He's like, "I can't believe you took my daughter's virginity." The guy's like, "Yeah, sorry, it won't happen again."
Okay, let's let MP finish the story without interruptions now.
I mean, that was basically my story. It's just,
what
I can do that part. It's that
what happened
I can't.
Afterwards?
Why was she upset about the tree?
She's an interesting individual. Because the trees are her friends. And she didn't want them hurt. I wish I was kidding.
Well,
no, it's valid enough, right? Personally, you don't have to agree. You don't have to think her points make perfect sense, but you can get how she feels, and then you can understand why she's sorry and upset, as you have shown. And that's really all your dad wanted in the end, although he hasn't shown the greatest display of charisma in swearing at you, because it very rarely helps people.
Oh, no, he didn't swear at me because we're a Christian.
Oh, I thought he was screaming at you.
No, he was vocal about my decision not being the correct one, but it wasn't like to the level of screaming and swearing.
Okay.
So sorry if I
don't know your dad.
Yeah.
I mean, why did you have to cut the tree? That's what I'm interested in. Was it like super necessary, or what was the reasoning?
No, it was because we couldn't. So we also mow her lawn, and the tree was to the point where we had to. We could not get in that area with the mower because the tree branches were touching the ground in like a 20-foot by 20-foot section. So I was just told the guy to get it 5 feet up off the ground, elevate it, so that we can get under there and cut the grass. So it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't necessary, and it was something that just would help us do our jobs later. But yeah.
Well, I mean,
okay, thanks for sharing the story.
Yeah, you didn't destroy the tree. Technically, it's still alive, I'm assuming. You know?
Yeah.
That's not a good argument if somebody thinks of trees as living creatures. Because, I mean, I didn't kill the guy, I just took off his arm. He's still breathing. What are you on about?
If I was a tree and I had like 14 arms, you know, losing one, it's like, ow, but, you know, I still have 13 arms.
Okay, I think that is enough about leadership. And finally, we get into the juicy things, which Impy has started off marvelously with telling us his personal stories. Because now it's time for all of you to share your personal views, opinions, and shabubbles.
Oh boy.
Shabubbles?
Shabubbles.
It's time for
Shabubbles?
uncontained.
Shabubbles.
Shabubbles.
What the heck are both of you on about?
What is that word? Is it German?
Shabubbles. It's not German.
What word is it? What language?
Shabuffles.